Hello YouTube, this is Jenny 2.0 here, and due to the copyright of YouTube, I can't use music from my speed paints, understandably so, considering, the music's copyrighted. So instead, I've decided to devise a way to have the speed paint available to you guys, but still be able to potentially make money from it if I choose so in the future. So what I'm going to do is have the speed paint running and commentate over it. It's kind of like a tutorial, but then speed paint because it's going quicker. And I'll have annotations to different parts of the tutorial, like if you want to know how I shade, and you can skip to certain parts of the video or what have you. Or, if you would much prefer, you could just mute me and put music on yourself and watch it as a speed paint. It's entirely up to you. But yes, let's get started. Alright, so here you can see I am sketching out my wolf character. The names at the bottom of the screen are the DeviantArt pages to the reference sheets I used. I wanted a pose that wasn't just straightforward walking or a normal pose, because I tend to do quite a lot of facing forward, facing sideways even, and just straightforward, and I want a bit more variety in my artwork, so I decided to kind of scout the world of stock and see what I could find. Here I was using the warp tool to adjust the tail because I wasn't happy with it. I also decided to add another leg in because I know that you can't see it in the reference sheet, but it bothered me that it wasn't there. I mean, I could have left it out, but I felt like if I did, it wouldn't have looked right. Like the image, I would have got quite a lot of people being, where's the other leg gone, if I didn't add that in. And then I used a different reference sheet for the feet because the feet was blocked in the last one. And this front foot, you can see me drawing now, I skipped a lot because that took quite a while to get me to do. I ended up using a photo by Woxy to get that foot right, but it took quite a lot of trial and error. I always tend to struggle with feet for some reason, like from different angles and whatever. And then I tend to do the background before I actually colour the character. Like I'll sketch this character out, but then to get like the placement of where he's going to be and stuff. But I'll always do the background or try to get the lighting for the background sorted before I even start drawing him. Here you saw me just add water in by just doing wavy lines. And then I use my own ripple brush to create ripples in here. And the ripple brush is clearly just a line that's blurred on each end. And then I just added that jitter to that. I made my own little brush for the clouds, and how I did that was I just selected one of the default brushes, have it on size jitter, angle jitter, roundness jitter, whatever, and just did a circle and made a brush. And here you see me draw my own clouds, but I draw the base colour of the clouds, and then I have like a darker grey, and have it opacity different, so I can just bugger about with it. And I blurred some bits and whatever, and flipped it so to make the reflection to the clouds in the sky. And then I was messing around with the background, trying to get the colour levels right. I wasn't really satisfied with it, even when I left it at, it was didn't quite seem right to me. Here you see me, I had already drawn the trees, but then I didn't like it because they weren't rippled, and I decided not to add any filters in this one because I thought I'd experiment to make ripples a different way. So I used the same brush I did before and just rippled it, and try and make the reflections that way. The layer level I'm using here is set to overlay, and it's on like a really light blue. Here I'm sketching the wolf's face. I tend to mix and match multiple reference sheets or stock images or whatever to get the right pose I want, because I didn't want the character looking down because he looked very withdrawn from the image, it didn't quite fit the character, and I like the character to engage with the audience. That's why a lot of my pictures they're actually looking towards the audience or whatever. Just adjusting a few things that I wasn't happy with. I felt like the leg was a bit too short and I wanted to see that foot a bit more. Now line arting! There's not really much to say about this one, but it's a very long process. I tend to do multiple strokes and then smoothen it out, which you'll see me do as I go along. I always start with the eyes for some reason. Pet peeve maybe, I don't know, but I tend to always start with the eyes and then go round the ears and stuff. I do the head first. I also tend to do line arts on two different layers. I have one layer for let's just say the head and stuff like that, but then you'll see certain parts of the character, fur and where the line art will be will cross over itself. Now, to avoid awkward looking lines to the point where I've had to stop or it's not flowing right, I do 2 layers and then erase the overlaps later. You'll see me do that later and I'll point it out when I do it. How I line art, the style I'd use, it would literally be lots of leaf shapes or wave shapes, like elongated waves. And I try to do lots of kind of thin, long lines rather than thick, bulky lines. And I will connect different lines up to have different tufts of fur and stuff like that. I was very concentrated in making the lines go downwards because in my head I was aware that character would be wet in this picture, so I was like trying to show that with the line up by making everything kind of heavy on the bottom. Now here's an example of where I use the overlapping line arts. Like you can see I've got 2 layers going on, different line arts, so I wasn't afraid to do it. So it tends to be the fluffy fur of the underbelly and the head and all that would be one, and then the legs will be another one, because they tend to overlap. I'm not really happy with these feet, if I'm being honest, but I made my peace with it because you couldn't really see them very well. So I like the front foot, the one I was struggling with in the end. It ended up being my favourite foot. Lol, favourite foot. But especially that back one, the one like stretched out, I didn't like. But I just made my peace with it and just kept going anyways. To do the fluffy parts of the paw underneath, the fur, I made the brush, instead of 15 pixel, I made it 10, and made it smaller. The brush size I have is 15 pixel, but the lines you see aren't 15. I don't push very hard when I draw, so I make it bigger than what I'd actually do it if I drew properly. Here you can see me erasing the extra line art and correcting the line art to the point of like making the pointed bits pointy. Like you never want any blunt parts to a line art. So I always round things off, make it nice and sharp and crisp, because I get a lot of comments, well, I had a lot of comments before in a previous picture about my line art. And this is pretty much all I do to make it look nice, is to make it pointed. Like, look at all this mess. If I just left that, it would have been very disorganized and scruffy looking. So I always make it pointed, sort it out. I didn't like that strand of fur there because I felt like it was tucked underneath and it wasn't showing the gravity I wanted with it being wet. A lighter brush, I think I had a 5 pixel this time, and I was going around doing the fur details. I lassoed tooled around the head and then did the correction of the line art here because I realised I merged them down and forgot to do this part. So to avoid erasing line arts I wanted to keep, I drew around what I knew I was going to keep and then erased the parts I didn't want. And then we have the base colour. I tend to go with a colour that's quite middle tone, so it's not too light, not too dark, so you can see it against white background and black background and against the black line art. And I will select outside the character on the line art layer and then go into a new layer and inverse the selection and then fill it and then erase the mistakes in it. And that's how I quickly fill in the character. Now here you see me using the standard, brush, but having it on flow and opacity, like pen pressure, and that's how I get it looking fluffy, like fur. I wasn't happy with the thickness of it on the body, so I do duplicate the layer later, and I just, rounded off the edges of the markings by making them pointed and stuff, because they were a bit blunt, and I didn't like that, because it wasn't how the character was anyways. So I duplicated the layer, made it darker, and erased the part of the tail, because I felt that was fine how it was. Here you see me doing the eyes. Now, I never make the pupils black. They're always a darker version of the eye colour itself. I have a darker version above, kind of do little flicks inwards towards the middle. I do gradient and overlay with multiply layer. Have like a gradient brush, sweep it over the eyelid with a light blue, because the sky's light blue because of reflection. Pick into it a little bit to make it look like fur or whatever. And that's the light you see. And then I have just white dots of light in the eye. That's how I tend to draw my eyes. Now, the nose, I've kind of developed a new style for the nose, but I do the nose, I define where the top of the nose is. I always define the nostrils and the ridge in the middle of the nose. Sweeped over with a scatter brush of circles, went onto mask and rubbed it out a little bit. Now, I always get rid of the markings before I start to shade, because I've had it before where something's not been shaded properly because I couldn't see it because the markings were in the way. So I make it single colour, preferably light so I can see it. So either the base colour I used or the colour of the character, and I shade. Now how I shade is that shading consists of, basically I'm just redrawing my line art, style of my line art, like how I draw the lines there, but overlap them and intertwine them, like, almost think of them like leaf shapes or drop shapes almost, like pointed. Basically that's just what I do, and I keep overlapping them and making them weave in out each other. I can't shade backwards, like I can't do a big chunk and then reverse it and take things away because of the shading style I have. It doesn't quite fit. That's why I never block colour a big dark patch and then chip into it. Because I find whenever I lasso segments away, it doesn't look quite as natural as what I did before. Added that line in there because I realised it didn't quite look right with the face being so flat on that side, as opposed to the other side. Added some fur detail on the face because I realised I'd forgotten it, and the like whisker spots and whiskers. I don't feel like I'm very good at shading the face, but I was quite pleased with what I came up with in this one. Adding fur detail on where the furry bits are of the line art, just because they're there, so it makes sense. Wasn't happy with that because I felt like the shadow wouldn't have reached down that far. Some places of the line art I shade from the bottom to the top, some places I shade from the top to the bottom. Like on the belly it was from top to the bottom. It's from away from the line art towards the line art, and in the ears it's from the edge of the line art downwards, so it depends on the direction of the line art. You always got to remember which parts are fluff and which parts aren't. I was going to continue going all the way down the leg and realised that the fluff wouldn't go down that far. I always enjoy shading tails. There's not very many layers of line art, or there's not like much dark at the bottom. Like a tail shade even is it tends to exceed all the way down to the bottom towards the line art. Whereas the belly, there was dark between the fur detail and the line art. Like, but on the tail there's not really enough there for it to not be, so it tends to go over down. Here I do another shading layer. The layers of the shading are set to multiply at 50% opacity, and then I adjust them later. So this is a second layer of line art, and here, where in the ear, I tend to highlight the inside of the ear with a lasso tool and then gradient brushed inside to give it a bit of depth of the ear, because the ear wouldn't have like a solid line. It would be a gradual increase. I'm just adding more detail on the belly of shading. I don't always do 2 layers, but I was experimenting a bit here. Some places the second shading will go right up to the first, and sometimes it will kind of creep up and gradually get darker and darker. It depends on which part of the line art. Now we have a third layer of shading, which is the gradient overlay, gradually make it a bit darker, and then we have a fourth one, which is literally a gradient going upwards to give a bit more of a highlighted shading. So that was 4 layers of shading. 2 gradients and 2 self-shaded. Here I'm doing the dirt, because I was aware that there's going to be some dirt showing, so I did the burn and dodge tool, scatter brush with the default brushes in Photoshop, and just overlaid it twice and made different things. Here I'm adding the water, because, the fur is wet, so you would see the water showing. And I put the layer over the line art, like it was completely over the character, so I could just draw freely without having to worry about the line art. Adding drops in, making sure they were very weighted towards the bottom, and added little specks of light on each of them. And here I grouped the character, and then I made a mask, and then I drew over the mask in like a grey and kept making it darker towards the bottom. And that's how it made it look like it was in the water without having to duplicate the background and do lots of complicated crap. Here I've got a flow brush, and I've just got like a light blue and a white, and I'm just going over and making ripples, and I'm adding water splashes the same way, but it wasn't on the flow that time, it was on the hard brush. Duplicated the character over and flipped it and made it gradiented a little bit so it looks like it's not completely connected, and that was the reflection. I'm just chittering about with the signature, add the border in, set the border and the signature and my own signature to overlay at the light blue. And then I added, realised I wanted some lighting in this, so I got like a really light yellow, graded it over the top, and then duplicated that yellow as well, and then I applied it to the line art, erased the parts of the line art that I wanted it to be black, and then there we go. So, thank you very much for watching, everybody. I hope this helps, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask me, and I'll try to help you out by answering them. In a bit. Bye bye!